On the Daily Mavericks website, journalist Danielle Scarfsma wrote, when Iranian-linked forces effectively closed the Strait of Hormuz in late February 2026, South Africa's grain farmers watched fertilizer prices spike by as much as 59% in a single month. The article goes on to say that South Africa's exposure to this kind of shock is structural, and the agricultural economist who made that point is Wandile Sihlobo. He joins us now to explain why. Wandile, good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, Hemi.
How serious is this fertilizer price hike that we're seeing for our farmers?
Hemi, I think perhaps it's best to put this in two ways. One, to assure South Africans that we have solid food supplies over the foreseeable future.
Okay.
The 2025-26 production season has been excellent across our fruits, grains, and vegetables. And this is something that will last this year through to mid-2027. But where the problem begins is from mid-2027 onwards in that harvest that will come at that time. But then that crop is the one that in the Western Cape, folks will be tilling their land, continuing after they get a breather from these rains, and in the northern regions of the country from October onwards. So that increase in the fertilizer prices is quite a serious problem for the season that we are about to start. And of course, especially when one considers how big fertilizer is as a share of input costs of farmers in general, it's about 35% or so, depending on what commodity you are in. But when you mix it with add fuel onto that, you could make a point that about half of their input costs are exposed to these issues of the Middle East. So it is quite serious, but it presents threats for the future, not immediate for the consumer, but for the farmers, those threats are immediate.
Wandile, in the article, the journalist says that farmers are being forced to turn to local options. Why are we not using locally produced fertilizer in any case?
The locally produced fertilizer are very few as to what you can do. South Africa imports about 80% of our annual fertilizer consumption. We utilize about 2 million tons a year. The constraint that we face, which is where we're saying it's a structural one, it's just that we don't have all of the ingredients of making a fertilizer that we need. That area of Middle East, for example, countries like Qatar are key producers of urea, and you need that to actually come up with a blend of the fertilizer that you need. And the whole world is exposed to this particular shock. But there are a lot more other countries that typically supply us the ingredients that we need, the likes of Russia, Oman, China, Germany, and Chile. But again, the likes of China have the constraints, and at times they even limit their exports. Thankfully, this time they haven't done. But in 2022, during that Russia-Ukraine war, they limited their exports, which added to the chaos that was already there in the market. So this is a long-winded way of saying we just don't have enough nutrients to be able to make all of what we need in South Africa. We're not naturally gifted with all of those nutrients, so we depend on imports.
Now, Wandile, let's just turn our attention to some of the positive news from the agriculture sector, and that is the increase in jobs in the first quarter. We didn't see many sectors that did increase the number of jobs, but agriculture was one of those that did. You say, however, that it's not without risk.
Absolutely, Amy, and I think this builds exactly to the point I was starting with to say, right now we are enjoying the fruits, the harvest of the crop that was planted from around October onwards. The current risk that we are facing of the higher fertilizer and fuel prices, along with the possibility of an El Nino, which could bring drought in the 2026-27 summer season. Those are the risks that I think going forward we have to be careful about. But of course, right now, especially at the start of this year, the farming sector created about We're now sitting with about 960,000 jobs at a primary level, and there's over 300,000 jobs that are in the value chain of agriculture. That's up 3% from a year ago. And it speaks again to these record harvests that we have in our grain. I mean, if you look at our summer grain this year, we have a record harvest of about 20.8 million tons in various stone fruits out of the Cape. In various citrus crops, the harvests are looking as excellently. And remember, Amy, this builds already on some of the excellent year because 2025 was good. I mean, judging from just the exports, we exported a record $15.1 billion of agricultural products last year. This year, we could still export a lot, but again, back to the Middle East story. About $1 billion of agricultural products go to that Middle East market, which is now, of course, negatively affected by all of these wars in the shipping costs. So we're in a year that has a lot of risk for exports, but also a lot of risk for inputs that we need in farming, and it complicates our path ahead. But in the immediate term, we're very encouraged to see those jobs. And I think throughout the year, we may see strong jobs in the sector. But I think from next year onwards, then all of these complications begin to weigh on the farmers' decisions.
Well, it's been a heavy news week. I'm going to choose to dwell on those wins, Wandile. Thank you for shedding some light on that issue for us this afternoon. Wandile Sihlobo on the line from Pretoria is an agricultural economist.